You're now listening to the Peach Pundit Podcast, where we are expressing our own personal opinions. These views may not reflect the opinions of those whom we may be professionally affiliated.
Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the Peach Pundit Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Pye, joined as always by Scott Turner and Buzz Brockway. Guys,
Howdy.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
And you may notice we have a special guest today, State Senator Butch Miller, who is currently campaigning for Lieutenant Governor of the great state of Georgia. Senator Miller, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, guys. I'm excited about being here. I've been watching your show and from time to time and really enjoyed it.
From time to time.
That's
a great qualified statement.
We enjoy it from time to time as well.
Yeah, that is the best qualified statement I have heard in a long time.
I like it.
Yeah, you like the ones that I don't show up on because I wasn't on last week's, for example, and these two clowns ran the show, and it's like letting the crazy people run the asylum. Anyway, Senator Miller,
we just passed a mental health bill. Be careful.
That's true. That's true.
If you must have missed those episodes of the podcast where we talked pretty in depth about that, so I was a great advocate for those the passage of the mental health bill. Well, great advocate. I couldn't call myself a great advocate. I was a big proponent of it because of my own struggles with mental health issues. But I want to give you a chance to talk about a little bit about your campaign, and then I'm going to let Buzz and Scott chime in here with questions for you.
Sure.
So, Senator Miller, tell us about your campaign. Tell us why you're running and what you hope to accomplish.
Well, thank you, by the way, for having me, and I'm happy to share some thoughts about the campaign and about why I'm running. Frankly, I have a passion and a vision for serving Georgia. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for the citizens of Georgia, for our children, our grandchildren, et cetera. I love what I do. I want to do it on a larger scale. That's why I'm running for lieutenant governor. I've had a can-do attitude in my personal life, in my business life, in my legislative life. And that's what I bring to the table. And the campaign is going great. All over the state, we've had tremendous turnout. The people are excited. We're having fun. They're enjoying it. The message is resonating. The message about conservatism. Someone mentioned conservatism a moment ago. Conservatism works, gentlemen. Conservatism made Georgia the number one place to do business. It made Georgia a great place to raise a family, and it made Georgia a great place to retire. So conservatism works, and that's the message that I want to make sure that we continue to broadcast and continue to live by in Georgia.
Well, thank you very much for coming on with us. We mentioned conservatism, and I think the reason why is before we actually started recording, I was mentioning to you and the others how I really felt like this legislative session was a huge win for conservatism overall. We had measure after measure, from the mental health care bill to tax cuts to tax rebates. The permitless carry was signed, which we'll talk about later. All these different conservative efforts came to fruition in this legislative session. So can you walk us through some of the highlights that you feel kind of stand out to you and your role in it?
Love to. Frankly, cutting the income tax was a big deal. I want to not just cut it, though. I want to eliminate it. The fact of the matter is Florida doesn't have an income tax. Tennessee doesn't have an income tax. What state do we compete with most for economic development, investment, and good jobs? That would be Texas. And Texas doesn't have an income tax. 6 other states don't have an income tax. I think what we did was good, but we need to go a little further. It's going to be a multi-year effort to get rid of the income tax, but I still think we can do it. Banning CRT, that was a big plus. That was a big plus. And by the way, that was my bill, and I'm proud to have introduced it and proud to have gotten it across the finish line. Keeping boys out of girls' sports. It's called girls' sports for a reason. It's for girls. Boys' sports are for boys. And I think the fact that we passed that piece of legislation and moved that forward is another great conservative victory. Constitutional carry. Constitutional carry has been discussed and batted around for a number of years, but it was all about the timing. We had the right momentum this year, and we were able to get that across the finish line. If I'm not mistaken, the governor signed that bill yesterday, in fact. So we mentioned mental health needs, and we took that kind of lightly a moment or two ago. But this is serious business. The mental health needs in Georgia are serious business. You ask any sheriff throughout the entire state, are there mental health issues in his jails, in his community, in his county? And he'll tell you yes. We all have those situations going on with our friends, our family, our community, et cetera, and no one's immune to it. So I'm glad that we're able to really address that. And that bill passed out unanimously on both sides. We passed a Parents' Bill of Rights. Parents need to know what's going on in schools. And I think that the pandemic brought a lot of things to light in our education system, in our economy, in our health system, our mental health system, et cetera. But one of the things it brought to light was that parents didn't really have as clear an idea what was going on in schools as they probably should have. School choice, another big issue. Those are big issues, and they really are great conservative issues. And we also were able to unmask our students. Frankly, students should not have been required to wear masks throughout this pandemic. Sure, there were times that maybe students should have been in masks. Sure, there were times when students shouldn't have been in school. But we have to get back to some sense of normalcy. Our students have probably lost an entire calendar year of education because of the pandemic. And we don't need to add to that by them not being able to learn and study and absorb because they're behind a mask. So those are some of the high points that we were able to accomplish this year. But also, we gave back $1.1 billion to Georgia taxpayers. And I think that's a great victory. And we were able to do that, by the way, partially because of the COVID liability immunity bill that we passed a year or so ago that prevented you or I from going into a restaurant or a business and claiming we were exposed to COVID in that circumstance, that venue, and then filing a frivolous lawsuit. So those are important things that we passed not only this year, but in previous years.
Senator Miller, before I go to Buzz, let me just say, talking about the mental health issues that the state faces. I work in criminal justice for a living. My job is based in Washington, D.C., and so I work on criminal justice reform both at the state and federal level, and have now going back to my time at FreedomWorks. So I do want to commend the Georgia General Assembly, you included, for passing that piece of legislation, which was absolutely vital to us understanding the complexities of criminal justice, which includes so many people who just have untreated mental health issues. You mentioned, though, eliminating the state income tax, and I know that policy idea has been maligned largely unfairly, and I'm not taking sides in the governor's race here. And I know there's one particular gubernatorial candidate who has talked about that and has been criticized for talking about eliminating the state income tax. But this issue was studied several years ago as part of a comprehensive tax reform proposal, I think before Scott and Buzz, either one of you guys were in the legislature. And I think Perdue was governor at the time it was last studied. I think Richardson was Speaker of the House. But obviously this would entail a lot, but this is something that can be done, and can be done in a way that broadens the tax base, and brings things through what would arguably be a more fair means of taxation, which would be consumption. Is that right?
I would agree with that 100%. And going back to that COVID liability immunity bill, which really enabled us to return that money. By the way, I am the only person in this race that voted for that bill. Anyone else in this race that voted for this bill voted against it. And that's very, very important. I will tell you that when we talk about taxes and the income tax and the potential for eliminating it, a broader consumption tax does what? It encourages people to save money. Early on in the campaign, one of the biggest questions I got was, how can we get people to come back to work? Well, what do we do when someone comes back to work? Well, the first thing we do is we tax them. If we tax them on the consumption, Wouldn't that encourage them to save? Certainly it would. Wouldn't that encourage them to spend their money more wisely? Certainly it would. So I think that the addressing the income tax and eliminating the income tax is a good goal, a noble goal. It's going to be a multi-year effort. I'm first to admit that. And you mentioned the tax fairness evaluation that we had, and I think it was a 2-year plan, and it was when they went all over the state of Georgia. They visited communities all over, and I don't recall the exact name of it, but it was something like the tax fairness plan. And one of the items that did was it eliminated the sales tax on energy used in manufacturing, among other things. But that's the kind of approach that we're going to have to take if we want to get serious about eliminating the income tax. And when we eliminate the income tax, we free up people's opportunity to make decisions about their own money.
Great. Senator Miller, you probably remember my old Congressman John Linder, who was a huge advocate of that on the federal level, and Neil Bortz were writing books and talking about it for a long time. So, yeah, I'm excited to see the issue still alive. Just a quick question for you. You mentioned school choice. There was a bill that passed which raised the cap a little bit on our tax credit scholarship program and eliminated the sunset, which was a big win. So appreciate your help on that bill. But also maybe talk a little bit about your decision to introduce, I believe it was Senate Bill 601, which would have created a promise scholarship, it was called, that would give about $6,000 to every parent. Unfortunately, it didn't pass, but we appreciate you fighting the fight and keeping that issue alive. It was kind of a bumpy road for that bill, as you know. It kind of got gummed up in the House, and then but you stepped in to revive it again and give it another shot. So maybe talk a little bit about why you decided to step in and give that bill a shot, and a little bit about that decision.
I wanted to promise scholarship for $6,000 because parents deserve a choice, and there are too many children that are caught in failing schools. Here in Hall County, I happen to be very, very fortunate. My family happens to be very, very fortunate. We have 3 great school systems. We have not only choice in school systems, we have 3 good ones to choose from. But not everybody in the state has that opportunity. And for those parents and those children that are in those failing school systems, and they don't see an opportunity for growth, and don't see an opportunity for success, don't see an opportunity for them to get the kind of education that those children need and deserve, this is the kind of bill that we need to help them with. And I think that ultimately this is going to pass. This is going to be kind of like I mentioned earlier, that the constitutional carry was this time was the right time, the right timing. We're going to have the right timing for this school choice bill and this promise bill. We just got to get the right timing, the right momentum. And I think it's going to pass it at some point.
Great.
So as Lieutenant Governor, would you continue to push that concept?
Certainly. I'd push it in the measured way that I presented it this time. I want to make sure that we don't damage our public school systems, but we give kids that are caught in systems that are not being successful, not being productive, and not appropriate, that we give kids the opportunity when they're in those systems. And on a similar, on a similar note, last year we passed other scholarships. So I'm also the only person in this race that voted for the special needs scholarships, and I think that's very important. My opponents in this race either didn't vote or voted no. I voted for special needs scholarships. I voted for school choice, and I think those are important votes for children and important votes for families.
Well, our family has benefited from the special needs scholarship over the years, and so I would thank you for your advocacy there. It has made a huge difference. My son is on the autism spectrum, and he he was doing well in elementary school, but when it got to middle school, it was really apparent he needed a different type of environment. And we made use of the special needs scholarship at that point, and it made a world of difference for him. So thank you for that.
Right.
So switching gears a little bit, you can't talk about Georgia politics these days without talking about election integrity.
Yep.
And there were several pieces of legislation that dealt with elections this year. It didn't seem like the Senate, and I might lay this at the feet of the current lieutenant governor, it did not seem like the Senate wanted to move a whole lot of election bills this year. The House had 3 bills that made it out of committee, one of which went over to the Senate Ethics Committee, got completely gutted on very close to sine die. And then that bill did not make it onto the rules calendar. It died in rules, and the House revived the bill, used one of your bills as a vehicle, which cleared the House very late in the evening, goes over to the Senate, and the lieutenant governor did not seem like he wanted to hear it. Is that an accurate description of events?
That's fairly accurate. It did not seem like he wanted to hear it would be an understatement. I mean, I have a great respect for all people involved in the legislature. Everyone that gives their time and their talents to contribute. I have an appreciation and respect. But the fact of the matter is we needed that bill, and that was a more encompassing bill than what we passed, but we needed that bill, and we couldn't get it. You know, Senate Bill 202 was a great start, and Senate Bill 89 would have had the GBI in there. It would have had other issues that were important to voters in Georgia.
Yeah. So things like being able to have access to the ballots and being able to do comprehensive audits, things that would build confidence within the electorate and our electoral system. Those were the things that were in there. In addition to things like giving people time off, which ultimately did not pass for advanced voting, right?
Well,
those were all.
The GBI piece was in there, the drop boxes, the access, not drop boxes, I'm sorry, access to the chain of custody was in there. Those were all issues that were in SB 89 that we tried to get onto the floor in the waning moments of day 40. But another thing that we didn't get across the finish line, and I hope we do in the future, it's imperative that we have citizens-only voting. It's bizarre to me to think that anyone could vote against citizens-only voting. We brought that to the floor. I presented that. We were looking for a constitutional amendment on it. Needed 38 votes. We have 34 Republicans. 34 Republicans voted yes, and all the Democrats vote no. You know, and I asked a couple of Democrats afterwards, one of which is originally from out of the country, and I said, "How long did it take you to get your citizenship?" And he told me, and I said, "Well, don't you value that citizenship? Because you voted against citizens-only voting. I don't understand. Explain that to me." And, of course, he couldn't explain that to me. But the fact of the matter is citizen-only voting should be part of our Constitution. It should be a constitutional amendment. It's important. It's important today. It'll be important tomorrow.
And it was so important that you took an extraordinary step. You don't see this motion made from the floor very often, but you made the motion to bring the bill to the floor, and the Lieutenant Governor didn't recognize you for that motion, or he ruled you out of order.
That's correct. Well, and that was Senate Bill 89. And Senate Bill 89, he would not refuse to recognize me, actually, and so I asked to have the Secretary of the Senate read the Senate rule. The Secretary of the Senate read the Senate rule. He ultimately did recognize me. I called the bill to the floor. Actually, I called the bill. What I called was to overrule his decision. And you needed 29 votes to overrule his decision. And we did not have 29 votes to overrule his decision.
So even at the last minute, we're talking, this is like 10:30, 10:45-ish on sine die, an hour and 15 minutes or so to go. You're still fighting for that bill, and you're just you reached the end of the rope at that point.
I did not want to move to overrule his decision. It was the absolute last thing I wanted to do. But the fact of the matter is, it was the only option I had. I had given my word to my colleagues and to my constituents that I would do my very best to get that bill across the finish line. So in desperation, frankly, I moved to overrule his decision. And again, we needed 29 votes and we didn't have them.
So, Senator, I guess I've got a little more general question. I know you've been campaigning for this office for a while now, but now the session's over. You're out there probably 24/7 between now and May 24th, working very hard. What are you hearing from the people of Georgia? What kind of issues are you hearing from folks that they really care about? I mean, the media tell us what people think in polling, but what are you hearing from folks that you're talking to out there about what matters to them right now?
Early on, one of the things I was hearing was about how do we get people to come back to work. The number one thing I'm hearing right now is inflation. Inflation. A pound of bacon is $10, give or take $10, and it's not even a pound anymore.
Scott was ranting about that a few weeks ago. So yes, it's
nuts. I mean, what's gone up in prices more, other than gas and gasoline and groceries? I mean,
the two things you absolutely have to have.
You absolutely have to have, and they've gone up exponentially. The greatest inflation we've had, I think, probably in 39 or 40 years. I'm reading, so that is
it was 81. It was 81. I think I joked that I was a year old. So yeah, I think it was December of 81. So I was a year old.
Well, that is really significant when you have that much inflation going on, and you have a 40-year span that we exceeded all the inflation during that time period. So I'm hearing a lot about inflation. I'm still hearing about election integrity. I'm hearing about immigration. Frankly, what we're hearing about at our southern border is disturbing. And, a few years ago, I was part of passing HB 87, which at the time was the strongest anti-illegal immigration bill in the country. I think a lot of states have copied that legislation, but that was very, very strong at the time. So I'm hearing a lot about inflation, immigration, how we get people to come back to work, and actually elections. Interestingly enough, I'm still hearing about election.
Interesting.
Yeah, the immigration topic is one that is a hot button on this podcast between the three of us, because I am surrounded by constitutional conservatives, whereas I am more libertarian in my political viewpoints. And I was writing something this week where I was actually putting together a concept for something related to second chance work, because we have an entire class of citizens who are generally are excluded from the workforce because they have a criminal record. And a lot of these are, minor offenses, drug offenses, not trafficking, possession being a good example of it. That's kind of beside the point. So the Congressional Budget Office, which is federal analysis, says by 2044, our net population growth in the United States will come from immigration. We are going to have as many people dying as we're going to have born inside the United States, and net immigration will be the only population growth driver. So the question I have to my conservative friends is, I get the concerns about illegal immigration. I do. But too often what is expressed as, we were concerned about illegal immigration comes across as we are concerned about immigration. And I have a really difficult time differentiating the two, because it really does come across as being not exclusive to illegal immigration. So this is not so much a question as it is just a word of please consider the rhetoric and the use of the rhetoric, because immigration is, look, in our what defines an economy is not how much an economy consumes, it's how much an economy produces. And our population growth is dwindling pretty quickly. I mean, I think from 2021 to 2020 to 2021, population grew by less than 1%. And that's something that's going to keep happening to the point where if we don't have workers available, our economic growth is going to suffer, and we're not really going to have an economy that produces as much, and that's going to leave our kids and grandkids worse off. It's just something I really would hope that anybody listening to this, including politicians and people running for office, really heed, is that we kind of need immigrants. And
I would just to jump right in and dovetail to what you're saying. Who among us is a Native American? You know, I mean, immigration is a part of the grand scheme of America. You know, the melting pot. But frankly, the illegal immigration, we have to close our borders. What nation doesn't have sovereign borders? I mean, when you go to Europe, if you cross from country to country, they want to know, do you have the important papers? And they want to know if you're going to be out of there that evening. I mean, so that is important. Sovereign borders are critical to the success of any nation. I am not against immigration. I don't think any of us are against immigration. What we're against is illegal immigration. And that's what is damaging to our economy, damaging to our culture, and damaging to the United States of America as a whole. So I would hope that all these folks who won't just scream about immigration, that they really specify we're talking about illegal immigration, where people are crossing the borders willy-nilly. It's unbelievable that we're having that happen on any border. I think it's happening most prevalently on our southern border. But, many years ago, my wife and I were in Europe, and we crossed from one country to another. And we were in the car, and we said, well, what keeps somebody from coming here and staying? And they said, oh, they can't stay. They can't work here. They've got to go home at night. If they come here and work for the day, they've got to go home at night. And that's the difference there's a huge difference between immigration and illegal immigration. That's like the difference between drugs and illegal drugs. I mean, that's the difference that's a huge difference, and not the two shouldn't be confused.
Well, Senator, thank you very much for your time. Before you go, you want to tell the folks who are listening how they can get in touch with your campaign or learn more about you?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. ButchMillerforGeorgia.com. You can find out about the campaign. Campaign is going great. We've been all over the state. Matter of fact, we were in 4 towns yesterday. We were in 3 towns on Monday. We worked the office today. We're back on the road tomorrow and Friday. And we are really loving what we're doing. I've got a vision and a passion for serving Georgia. And that's why I'm running for lieutenant governor. I think that Georgia is the greatest state in the union, and the United States of America is the greatest country in the history of the world. And as I stated earlier, conservatism works, gentlemen. Greatest place to do business, great place to raise a family, great place to retire. And that's all because of conservative policies, conservative legislation, and conservative ideas.
Awesome.
Thank you, Senator,
Thanks, Senator.
and good luck.
And remember, don't close out your browser. We'll kick you off, but don't close out your browser until it's at 100%. Thank you, Senator.
Famous last words.
All right. So going into our normal podcast here, guys. I know we exchanged some texts today about what to talk about, and I got to say all I got to say, I tweeted this out today. Watching David Perdue's campaign is like watching a dumpster fire burn and inject it straight into my veins. Because like I'm loving it. Like I'm just loving it. I'm loving I don't even support Brian Kemp. I like Brian personally. Like Brian, think he's a great guy, great dude. But I am enjoying watching David Perdue just crash and burn. It is the most beautiful, it's like one of those cheesy horror flicks that you just can't stop watching, no matter how bad it is. So yesterday, and the reason I say this is because yesterday David Perdue managed to step in a proverbial pile of crap by saying he wanted to return the Georgia State troopers to elite status, and that might have come as a surprise to Georgia's law enforcement community.
It did.
Because you had more than 20 sheriffs today who blasted Perdue for his comments. And and when I say dumpster fire, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Why this man is continuing to run a losing campaign just boggles my mind. So, Buzz, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I don't know what he meant by that. I don't know. I'm not aware of any problems. I mean, my encounters with troopers, thankfully, are when we're at the Capitol, and they're just awesome folks. Everyone I've ever met has been an awesome person and a serious law enforcement officer, and they're just good folks. And so I don't know where this is coming from. I kind of perused the news, kind of Google searched, has there been some scandal that I was unaware of, or, a dip in morale that had been reported on? I didn't see anything. So I was puzzled by this, but I just, your point is right, Jason. It strikes me that nothing has really caught fire for Perdue. So he's just, I thought, well, he's just kind of throwing mud against the wall to see what sticks. And, he's got this, he's still, campaigning on the Buckhead City movement, which, affects a small part of North Atlanta. I mean, that's why I was curious. I mean, you heard from, Senator, that was one of the questions, part of the reason why I asked Senator Miller, what is he hearing from folks out there? It's not the Buckhead City movement, and it's that's an Atlanta issue. Right. And those folks, you get outside of Atlanta, those folks don't care about Atlanta. They got their own issues that they want to talk about. And so I don't know. It just seems to me more and more that nothing is catching fire for Perdue, and I guess we're going to be treated to another 5 weeks or whatever it is, 6 weeks of this. Here's a really bizarre issue. Let's see if this works, because nothing's working.
The Buckhead City thing. Yeah, the Buckhead City thing seems – I'm coming to you, Scott. The Buckhead City thing seems hardly like the populist issue that we're used to the Trumpists running on.
Yeah.
But, Scott, I'll let you go.
Actually,
you know what? I have something else to say real – I'm kidding. Scott, go ahead.
Do you know that the imagery I want to paint for those who are listening is the inflatable dude. It's a tube. And he kind of
wacky wailing, arm flailing,
flails his arms,
yeah.
And he bends over and he flails his arms. That I see more discipline in one of those displays than I do from the David Perdue campaign.
That was beautiful.
I mean, I see more discipline from a clown show than from the David Perdue campaign. Look. I said this on the podcast several weeks ago. He has to be contrary on everything because what the governor's doing is working. He can't just say, me too, me too, me too. Although yesterday during his rant, which the Kemp campaign is calling the unhinged rant, during his rant, he did say that he would have signed the permitless carry bill that Kemp was too. But so he gets into this dangerous spot where if he doesn't disagree with Kemp on a lot of things, it's and also ran. I also would have done that. I also would have done that. And he's in this position where he cannot differentiate himself because the policy has been good. We just talked for 25 minutes with the candidate for lieutenant governor who just outlined all the different conservative measures that passed this legislative session. And if he doesn't say something different, then what's the point in kicking out the incumbent, right?
Well, I guess to that point, Scott, if I could just interject for a second, what he did say yesterday was his accusation about the permitless carry was that Brian Kemp hadn't done anything on it until Perdue jumped in the race and forced his hand. So, I mean, that's at least that's something you can argue about, right? That the two candidates can argue about. And I think we heard what Senator Miller said, the
about timing.
Yeah, timing. It just maybe didn't have the
right.
votes in one or both bodies to get that passed, and you did now.
Well, Micah Gravely was at the signing ceremony, and he posted that he was proud to stand with the governor when he signed the bill. And I made a cheeky comment when I said, well, I hope the governor saves a pen for Matt Gertler. And
I don't think that happened, but yeah.
No, I don't think it happened. But, I was being cheeky with my friend Micah, and Micah responded, he would have if Matt hadn't been, if there hadn't been other legislators that brought the bill before Matt did. And I was like, oh, so you're going to give one to Charlie Gregory then. So for those who don't know who those people are, get to know
yourself blessed.
You did, yeah.
Consider yourself blessed, I guess. Yeah. So at the bottom line, though, is can he make that argument? Yeah. Will it stick with some folks? Maybe. But the reality is that there have been people in the legislature, yours truly, who've been pushing for permitless carry for a long time. And we couldn't get it passed for various reasons, right? I mean, it was either the sponsor had gotten sideways with leadership, which is really the reason why it hadn't passed before now. But every year in the last 10 years, almost every year, there's been some sort of measure that has moved us forward towards this goal. So if you're going to make the argument that it didn't happen because of you, well, that's not really the case, because every year we chipped away. You got campus carry done. We expanded gun rights with HB 60 several years ago. And every year we chipped away. So we finally got to this point where it was time. And like Senator Miller said a moment ago, it was about the timing. Did he push him? Well, here's the thing I know about Brian Kemp. He's made a whole lot of promises. And $5,000 increase for teachers. Promise made, promise kept. He kept the state open for the most part, with 4 minor exceptions during COVID. He allowed people to continue to worship during COVID. There were all kinds of things that he tried to do to balance economic health with public health. And he navigated that really quite well. And now he's at a point where our unemployment's super low in Georgia. There was $1 billion left over after they spent everything and gave everybody raises. So they gave us a rebate. They lowered the tax rate. These are wins. And you cannot be David Perdue saying that those are ugly things, even though he has said those things. He said that the teacher raises were disgusting. Yeah. That's how he is running his campaign. I see more discipline out of the floppy guy in front of the car dealership than I do from the campaign.
It's getting back to what we talked about on this podcast from the get-go. I mean, David Perdue has one reason and one reason only that he's running. It's a grievance campaign on behalf of Donald Trump. And that's, he's got 30, low 30s in pretty much every poll that's been taken. So there's, that issue resonates with certain people, but it's, I don't know, unless the dynamics change. I mean, we got a ways to go. I suppose it's too early to call the race, but, Perdue needs the dynamics to change. And I don't know what that could be that changes those dynamics.
Getting 20 sheriffs to line up and condemn your comments is not the winning strategy, bro.
No.
It's not. And I'll go on record as saying the best time for David Perdue to have dropped out and endorsed Brian Kemp was months ago, and the second best time is right now. Just go ahead.
Yeah, we all know why he's running. It's because Daddy told him to, and that's all it is. So, look. I'm gonna come back to the next topic. We already touched on it a second ago, but I want to come back to it in a second. But so we got a couple other things related to the governor's race that I think it's worth talking about. First of all, you have a Trump-backed political action committee that is coming in. It's called Get Georgia Right PAC. Coming in with a $500,000 ad buy against Brian Kemp. And one of the taglines is, if Kemp can't beat voter fraud, he won't beat Stacey Abrams. Let's keep in mind that he's beat Stacey Abrams once already. And I'll also say it's hard to win a race when you have somebody forcing you to spend a ton of money and burn through your own war chest. But I guess that's I'll have to digress here. But this ad is clearly it's coming right at Brian Kemp and hoping to boost David Perdue. Scott, what do you make of? Have you had a chance to look at this ad yet? Or
yeah, and here's my take. My take is that there are 20% of Republicans who this is their number one issue, and that's it. and they've already got those 20% solidly in Camp Perdue. I don't think it's going to win any other Republicans over. I just don't. I don't have any reason to believe at this point, because this message has already been told. This message has already been cast by the Perdue campaign. We already know that Donald Trump is supporting David Perdue, and we know why. There are no Republicans left who haven't heard that story, and they're not breaking for David Perdue. They're just not. So I don't think this is going to touch the double-digit lead that we see in every poll in the last 3 months for Brian Kemp.
Yeah, Buzz.
I agree, and I saw the ad too, and I just thought that they're gonna drop $500,000 for that. I mean, I don't see it moving the needle.
Yeah, and this kind of plays into another topic we had is that Governor Kemp had a bit of a back and forth with some Trump supporters, presumably Perdue supporters, at the Fulton GOP meeting, where he said it to him, like, what Trump wanted was something I couldn't do. I'm a governor, not a dictator. And he had no authority to not sign to certify Georgia's election and Georgia's electors. And there's been this myth that he could have done something to prevent it and something to stop it. And he's aggressively pushed, to his credit, he's aggressively pushing back, in the face of what is essentially people who don't want to acknowledge that Joe Biden won Georgia, Donald Trump lost Georgia, and Donald Trump ultimately cost Republicans 2 Senate seats.
Yeah, and I think that message was also in the Get Georgia Right PAC ad, that Kemp didn't call a special session, and it's always puzzled me, because what were they supposed to do in this special session that would be legal and that would withstand court challenge, that wouldn't cause massive riots in the streets? Yeah, I mean, Kemp is absolutely right. He's a governor, not a dictator, and I think that's a good line. And I imagine we'll hear it again, because he's probably going to get challenged. And look, I guess to Kemp's credit too, he could run away from these. He knows if he shows up at Republican Party meetings, there are going to be people there who are going to bring this stuff up. He still shows up and he still talks to folks.
And the important thing to know is that the people that were at the Fulton County GOP who were challenging him were just a handful of people.
Yeah.
They were loud, they were obnoxious, they were rude, but they were not the majority. The majority stood up and applauded Brian Kemp when he said, I'm a governor, not a dictator, because they understood what that meant, because they're conservatives. They're not – look, I was in the legislature when all of this was going down. If they had called me back in for a special session, let me tell you what I would have done. I would have made a big stink about the fact that I was there, because I believe in the Constitution, and I believe in the separation of powers as outlined in our Constitution, state and federal. When you think that there is something wrong, that somebody has broken the law, you don't call the lawmakers into session. You go to court.
Right.
You challenge it in court. And that was what was happening time and time again, i.e. the Kraken lady brought her lawsuit, which was thrown out without merit, right? I mean, there are a whole bunch of things that you can do, but the checks and balances and separations of powers here prevents the legislature from passing laws retroactively to deal with things.
Yeah.
There is nothing that we could have done legally or constitutionally to have prevented that from happening. What happened happening. Yeah.
And you really
couldn't even. The only thing you could do is
you really couldn't even change the law to affect the runoff, the Senate runoffs. You couldn't have done
because
anything
it was
to change
already
that.
Underway.
Yeah.
Right. It was already underway. The only thing you could have done is gone to court, because that's the appropriate branch of government for dealing with, has somebody broken the law? Is everybody following the law? And who needs to call balls and strikes? It needs to be a judge. And if there's crime, a jury, a grand jury. You can do things through the courts. That was the appropriate branch of government to deal with those things. So the governor is well within his right to say, look, I'm not a dictator. I'm a governor. I believe in the Constitution. And so somebody stands up and tells him he's a liar in public, and he says to them, if you're going to talk about truth, then you have to understand the nature of our Constitution. And that is what my allegiance is to, and I hope it would be for you as well. And the vast majority of the people in that room cheered for him. And I would cheer for him too, because as a constitutional conservative, even when things aren't going my way, I want people to play by the rules as outlined in the Constitution.
Yep.
Indeed.
Yeah, I agree. And things seem to be, his message seems to be resonating. Most people discount internal polls. The public polls for Governor Kemp look really good. Not quite to a 50+1 majority, but he is with the number of undecideds, it's very possible that he gets to 50+1 without a runoff. And his internal polling, which was covered this week, shows that he could win outright, and I think it's more likely than not that he wins outright, but that he could win outright and beat David Perdue and avoid a runoff and avoid the additional time and additional money he would have to spend to get past that, which let's face it, would be stupid at this. It would be stupid to have if Perdue forced that, but the internal polling is certainly looking up for him.
Yeah. I don't like to put a lot of weight on internal polling, but I will say this about it. It is tracking with every other public poll that we have seen. It's very close in numbers with every other public poll that we have seen, minus the WRBL poll, which I think is an outlier because Catherine Davis had 5 points in that poll. That alone, I believe it was an outlier. Candace Taylor was in 4th place in that poll, which I think is it was an outlier. So if we treat that poll as an outlier,
oh my God,
the Brian Kemp internal polling is tracking with what we're seeing in other public polls.
So
that being said, not one poll is showing any momentum for David Perdue. Not one.
Let me just real fast. Your girl Candace Taylor might be crazy.
You think?
She might be a little crazy.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you. I hope she makes use of that new mental health bill that just got passed into law.
Oh my!
Please seek help. We're here for you.
But look, she might be, but she's in the race, and I'm just talking about from a pure numbers standpoint. All the clown show that is her campaign aside, and her campaign slogan aside, and all the fun that we poke at it, that I poke at it. The reality is she's in 3rd place, and that poll done to WBRL had her at 2 points and Catherine Davis at 5, which indicated to me the poll is not good.
But Scott, even that poll showed an 11-point lead for Kemp, which the Fox News poll taken a month earlier showed, and which it was a poll conducted at the request of the campaign, really of a PAC supporting the campaign, and it showed an 11-point lead for Kemp. Right. So I think what's interesting is so Scott discounts the WRLB Emerson poll, still showed an 11-point lead, and as did this poll for Kemp Super PAC. That both of those took place after the Trump came to town to rally his supporters on behalf of David Perdue and the entire slate. So there was no bounce for Perdue at all as a result of Donald Trump coming in and the continued running of these ads saying Brian Kemp let us down, yada yada yada, vote for Perdue. It's
no momentum for Perdue
changing the dynamics of this race. Yeah.
So the Georgia don't want David Perdue, at least so it seems. So I know we touched on this when we were talking about David Perdue early on, but the Governor Kemp did sign a constitutional carry, which Scott for some reason calls permitless carry. And into law. I don't know if you guys want to talk about that for another second. I think for a lot of people, this has been, you mentioned some of the past legislators who had worked on this, carried this bill in the past, and the reasons it didn't move in past legislative sessions. Obviously, it's a big deal for Georgia gun owners, people who want to carry without, basically using the Constitution, the Second Amendment as their concealed carry permit or their gun permit. So it's a big deal.
Yeah,
So.
it is a big deal. And the number one thing you need to know is that if you're a criminal, you're still not legally allowed to carry, right? I mean, if you're a convicted felon, if you're not legally allowed to carry a gun, this does not allow you to do that. If you're a law-abiding citizen who doesn't have a criminal record and could potentially pass a background check, you are allowed to carry now in those areas. It doesn't affect private property. So if a private property owner doesn't want you to carry on their property, they can still prevent you from doing that. The other thing too is that the permit does become optional. So I am a concealed weapons carry license holder. I will still maintain that because there is reciprocity with other states when you have that, where you can travel with your firearm if you feel it's necessary, and you would have that freedom to do so with that permit. So I will keep my permit, and I think the wise people who travel, especially throughout the Southeast, would be well served.
A really good point that I think a lot of people are going to forget is like, well, there's no point in concealed carry licenses now. Actually, there is, because if you want reciprocity with other states that recognize Georgia licenses, saying the Second Amendment is your concealed carry license is not going to fly.
Yeah, right. and so that's what the bill does. And everywhere it's been done, there hasn't been blood in the streets. There hasn't been a rise in crime or gun violence. So I'm happy. I'm stoked about it.
Buzz, that line of messaging from Democrats calling it criminal carry seems a little ill-advised.
I guess they got to call it something. So, we Scott, you and I were there when we passed a bill that they called the Guns Everywhere bill. Well, this really is This is a Guns Everywhere bill. This bill. So, yeah, I think that I guess it's a core principle of theirs to oppose the expansion of gun rights for most Democrats, but that's a message that just won't stick because, as you guys have mentioned, it's not going to be borne out by events on the ground.
Yeah. So moving along, Herschel Walker, guys. Herschel Walker.
Who?
Herschel Walker.
Who's that?
He is a candidate for United States Senate, currently the front runner in the Republican primary.
Really?
For said race. So I'm sitting in at lunch, and I had lunches every day last week. I was in DC, lunches every single day. I'm not going to tell you guys with whom because I don't want to make anybody uncomfortable. But I was having lunch with a prominent libertarian figure, and he was asking me what I thought about Herschel Walker, and I said, he goes, "What do you think is going to happen with Warnock and Walker?" And I was like, look, I mean, Walker is, the patron saint of Georgia football. He was the star running back, the Heisman Trophy candidate, and the guy who gave Georgia its before the most recent one, their most national title. And I was like, that's going to go a long way with a lot of voters.
He's Stetson Bennett before there was a Stetson Bennett, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly true. So I was like, but his big qualifier is like, there's so much baggage, with him that I was like, it's going to be competitive.
Yeah.
In a year where that race probably shouldn't be competitive. And, Warnock has his own baggage, sure. But this is going to be basically who hits the other person hardest, mm-hmm. and who makes the attack stick. And, my understanding, Democrats are going to pour in tens of millions of dollars into Georgia to protect that seat because they need if Warnock loses, Republicans take back the Senate. I don't care what anybody else says. So and then now there's other stuff going on, like the Daily Beast has a story about Herschel Walker's claims to own companies that don't exist, and then Walker skipping out on debates, which is. I've said this before. I can understand, a candidate, an incumbent who has a 40-point lead on his opponents skipping a debate. All he does is stand to lose, but from debating. But Walker, no one knows who he is. I mean, well, everybody knows who he is, but nobody knows who he is in this race
right.
as a politician, as the servant of the people of Georgia.
Right.
When you go to Washington, how are you going to represent us? Nobody knows.
Yeah,
because he doesn't seem to have much of a grasp of policy, and he's going to have to start showing people something at some point because he might not have to do it now, but he's going to have to come do it in the general election or do it come the general election. So I leave it to you guys to tell me why I'm wrong.
I don't.
Well,
Go ahead, Scott.
I don't know that you are wrong.
Can you say that a little louder, please?
Well, there are a lot of things I don't know, and I don't know if you're wrong on this. So, twofer.
Which means I might be right.
You might be right. You might be right, but I don't know. But here's the thing. Not showing up for the debate was weak sauce. It was completely weak sauce. We had Latham Sadler on the podcast last week, and Latham tweeted at Herschel. The reason why Herschel, his stated reason for not coming to the debate over the weekend, was that he had a prior obligation where he had to go to an awards ceremony where they were honoring him with an award in Texas. So we already know that when it comes to doing the job, what Herschel told me, by choosing to go get an award as opposed to do the job of being a senator, which is to debate ideas in public square, he told me that he's about Herschel. That's what he told me. He told me that he would prefer to be honored at this award ceremony than come ask for my vote. And I felt insulted by that. Latham Sadler's campaign tweeted at him a flight schedule. Here are all the flights available to you where you can still receive your award and still fly in and make it to the debate on time. I thought that was smart. Nobody knows who Latham Sadler is, unfortunately. So, but I will say I did see a couple different like grassroots activists within the Republican Party, like old timers, people who've been around a while, who have a circle of influence, if you will, within their own part of the state. And they were talking about Kelvin King and Latham Sadler. Those were the two people that stood out to them. Now, Gary Black claims that he won the straw poll. Straw polls mean that Ron Paul would have been president if they were effective. So we know how effective straw polls or meaningful straw polls are. That being said, the three of them really felt like they did well. And from my feedback that I saw on social media, people who were discussing the debate and the results of the debate, a lot of people were narrowing it down to Kelvin or Latham. And a couple people, honestly, for Josh Clark. Mm-hmm. I saw a couple people say Josh Clark did well. So you have a field of candidates who are taking this seriously, and Herschel's not. Who, Josh?
Yeah. Clark
he probably just had all of his kids fill out the ballots, right? Yeah, that would have put him at 50%. So Josh, I'm kidding. So that dude has a lot of children. I'm not kidding. All that to say, we're hearing now that the heavyweights of the Republican Party, the Newt Gingriches of the world, the Virginian Newt Gingrich, the Lindsey Grahams, they're coming around Herschel, and they're trying to give him a crash course in policy because he doesn't know what he's talking about. And every time you put him in front of a microphone, he stumbles around and he sounds like something's off, right? So these guys are coming around, the policy experts are coming to him saying, let's teach you. And that's a little disconcerting because we have a lot of people who are on the stage right now. They're casting a vision. They're talking about policy in an educated way, and they don't need to be taught. And here it is. It's April 13th. We're a month and 10 days from a primary election, and he is just now learning policy from these people. That's disturbing to me.
Yeah.
And in 7 months, he could be sworn into the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was interested to see how people would react to Herschel not showing up to a debate. Because he does have that huge lead, even in the poll that Scott says is an outlier, still showed him at 57%, which seems, I don't know, maybe it's trending down. We'll see if other polls say that or not. But the reaction hasn't been very good for Herschel. And what's interesting though, I think what we'll have to watch is, this is the reaction of party activists and party insiders. What does the general public think that Herschel's gonna? And I don't, I guess I don't watch a lot of broadcast TV. I don't know what ads are being out there, but you got to think that pretty soon. I mean, Latham Sadler's raised a couple, almost $4 million. Gary Black's raised some money. Black has been the one that seems to have been most willing to go on the attack. What happens when Herschel starts getting really hammered by his opponents on the airwaves? Do we have a runoff situation here? And then, which nobody would have predicted a couple months ago or even a month ago, that Herschel will be facing a runoff. And then what happens? I mean, I don't know. This is, it's going to be fascinating to watch how this plays out over these next month and a half here.
No, it is, and I'm watching with I don't know. I'm intently watching. I'm really curious to see how this is gonna work out. Got a couple more quick topics. So Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, he has called for investigations into non-citizens trying to register to vote. According to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, there were a little bit more than 1,600 possible non-citizens who sought to register to vote, although none of them actually cast a ballot. And that was, I think, 5 years of voting records. So, look, to me, this seems just like a ploy to raise awareness, to appeal to the base. But because he's in a competitive primary as well, and against Jody Heiss and David Bell Isle. So is there a there, or is this just attention seeking?
Well, they're going to make a big deal out of this every time they find something like this at this point, right? And so they found 1,600, and so what the big news story was, we've turned these over to the GBI to be investigated. Well, is anything ever going to come of it? Last time he did this, where he said there were people who did multiple votes, almost nothing was found. So he had a big press conference. They stood in front of the cameras and they said, we found thousands of instances of people double voting. And that was the headline. And then when the investigation was complete, they were like, no, really nothing ever happened with it. And I think that's what probably is going to happen here. You have over 5 years, some people who were not citizens trying to vote, or trying to, not to vote, but trying to register to vote. And it could be something as simple as this. We have motor voter in Georgia, and they didn't check the box.
Yeah.
Right? They got their driver's license.
Right.
And they're not a U.S. citizen, but you don't have to be a U.S. citizen to get a driver's license in Georgia.
Sure.
And they didn't check the box. And they didn't know they had to or whatever. And that registered or attempted to register the vote, and it got caught by the system.
Yeah.
Which, if I were the Secretary of State, that's what I'd be focusing on. Hey, the system worked. Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The system worked. Right. These people, they may or may not have been criminally liable, but we caught it. It took us 5 years, but we caught it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing and I think what the Atlanta Journal-Constitution article says, like these were people who knowingly attempted to register to vote, knowing they couldn't vote because they were not residents. But did they have malicious intent? And right. I know malicious intent is not a specific mens rea, but did they even know what they were doing?
Right.
Right.
Is it a language barrier
as
issue?
Someone who has
they don't speak the language didn't
barrier
really
issue,
understand the question. Right. Any host, all hosts.
You're just trying to. You're just trying to get through the process and get it over with. Take your picture that you're going to wind up hating. That's going to be on your license for the next 10 years.
Right.
That's the kind of thing I'm sure people are focused on. Buzz.
No, I don't know what else to add. I think it's.
I'm not saying there weren't people who. Yeah, I'm not saying there weren't people who were trying to register to vote who knew they couldn't, but come on.
Yeah.
And as Scott said, I'd be pointing out that the system worked. Last but certainly not least, Fair Fight Action is after 3.5 years is finally going to trial over some of Georgia's election laws. This goes back to the 2018 loss that Stacey Abrams had to Brian Kemp, as well as the 2020 election. It targets Georgia's exact match voter registration and inconsistent absentee ballot cancellation practices, according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. 3.5 years for a case of this magnitude to actually go to trial seems really long. But it is finally going to trial. What do you guys expect from this?
I'm confused by this. I'm confused by this for a couple different reasons. The court will hear the trial based on three things, and the number one thing is the use of exact match, which I'll talk about in a second. The second thing is they claim that not enough election voters were fully trained, and so that's an interesting argument to make. And the third is that we do not allow non-citizens to vote in Georgia. So Fair Fight Action is fighting for non-citizens to be able to vote in Georgia. And that's like the one thing where I think that's a slam dunk. No, you're going to lose that aspect. The training thing, I can say, the COVID hurt things, but in 2018 we didn't have COVID, so the counties are really responsible for training their employees when it comes to running elections. And the Secretary of State is required to work with the counties to make sure that those people are trained. So it's a dual responsibility between the locals and the state. And lastly, let's talk about exact match. They're suing because the state used exact match. But in HB 316, which passed a couple of years ago, which is the voting machine bill, we eliminated the use of exact match. So I'm confused why that's still in there, because it occurs to me that it's moot. There is no remedy for the court to impose on the state because the legislature's already taken action and eliminated exact match as the methodology for checking absentee ballots.
Yeah, unless you're arguing past grievances, which would seem to be, if you're making an argument that past grievances, you still haven't let go of that loss in 2018.
Yeah,
fine. But going forward, there is no injury.
Yeah,
right. There's no remedy. There's nothing the court can do to the state to make them fix it because they've already fixed it.
Right.
And they've already
the fact that this court case is continuing is confusing.
Yeah, and they've already had to amend this lawsuit numerous times, including it came up because one of Abrams' former attorneys, or I guess for Fair Fight Action's former attorneys, is nominated for the Federal Elections Commission, and Ted Cruz was questioning this person and this woman and asking her, pointing out that in a filing in this suit, they argued that hackers hacked the machines to switch votes to benefit Brian Kemp. That was in their court filings. So, it's
talk about a Kraken lawsuit.
Yes. Was Sidney Powell involved with this? I don't know. So she said, well, she admitted, well, the Georgia changed the machine, so that's a moot point now. But it's
a lot of that. The original lawsuit, a lot of it is moot because the legislature took action.
Yeah,
and they tried to make it so that it would fix a lot of these concerns.
Sure,
not just specifically for this lawsuit,
which folks need to understand. After every election cycle, Brian Kemp did this every time he was Secretary of State, because I carried one of these bills for him. They sit down with elections officials across the state and they say, what did you notice? How did it go? What can we do to improve? And out of that comes a bill that has a bunch of tweaks to election. And it's an ongoing process. And so, yes, if there's a problem with the election, the legislature should take action and fix it, which is what has happened numerous times in Georgia over and over and over again, and will continue to happen.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry, I was muted. So I think that's all the time we have for today, guys. Before we go, I do want to remind you that we have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/peachpundit. We finally have a precious subscriber whose name I was trying to pull up, but Patreon
Sam
is
Thomas.
Sam Thomas.
So go ahead.
Sam.
Say it again.
Sam
Thomas.
Sam Thomas. God bless you, Sam Thomas, for being our very first subscriber.
In keeping our word, we are giving our shout out to our singular Patreon subscriber. That is Sam Thomas. So Sam, thank you so much for your patronage. We appreciate it. If you want to throw us a few bucks, you can go to patreon.com/peachpundit. You can sign up for any one of the 4 tiers that we offer. Each tier has its own benefits. So we hope you will throw us some cash. And again, I want to remind people, this is not going into our pockets. We're actively trying to upgrade, how this podcast sounds. We're on a new system now. We used Zoom for about a year, and then we got kind of tired of Zoom, and decided to go to this newfangled Riverside FM program that Scott found, and it's working okay, but it costs money.
It does, and that's coming Zoom, out of my pocket right now.
Yeah,
I'm the one paying for that.
Yeah, Zoom came out of my pocket, so you can whine about it, and that's fine.
Minus the $5 that Sam Thomas kicked in for this month. So thank you, Sam.
I'm smart enough to make sure nothing comes out of my pocket. So.
Yeah, you just have to write the post. So yeah, just so you guys know the division of labor, I edit the podcast. Like, I'm the one who puts it on SoundCloud, which means it goes to Spotify and goes to Apple Podcasts. I'm the one who uploads it on YouTube. I have the toughest job of the three of us, because mine is time consuming. Like, I have to sit there and wait for this thing to render and upload, and before I can do anything else. Well, you were bitching about money a second. I don't want to hear it, Scott. Scott has taken on some more responsibility. I will give him that, and he puts the agenda together and makes sure I don't read anything before we go on air. And Buzz writes the blog posts and the copy that wind up in the description of all the podcasts that you see on Spotify, YouTube,
team effort,
and Apple Podcasts.
I do want to say one thing, and that's about our guests that we've had over the last several weeks. And because we've had a guest for the last 3 weeks, just because they appear on the podcast doesn't mean that we're voting for them or we support them. We're going to have a friendly conversation with anybody who comes here. We're not here to be confrontational and get into people's faces.
Right.
If we want them to be able to make their pitch to our audience, if you think that they're good and you want to vote for them, that's on you. I want you to know that just because they appear here, that's not an endorsement.
And we've reached out to other candidates, and we will continue to reach out to other candidates. And
right.
Hopefully before the primary, we'll get most of the major candidates on here.
Right.
Yeah. That's the goal.
If you're Burt Jones right now and you're from his campaign and you're wondering why we haven't invited him, here's your invitation. Come sit with us, and we'll be just as friendly with you as we were with Butch.
Yeah, will we though?
Yes, absolutely. Said with a straight face, because I'm serious.
All right. Have a good rest of your week. We'll see you next week. Peace out. Make sure you go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, as well as patreon.com/PeachPundit. Check us out. Throw us a few bucks to continue the internal improvements here at the podcast. With that, we'll see you next week. Peace out.
Next week.